Dr. James Rivera had been on the Caliph homeworld for exactly 93 days, and he'd managed to speak directly to Queen Seris Valmurin exactly 17 times. He'd counted, not because he was tracking some kind of achievement, but because he was tracking avoidance, making sure he wasn't accidentally spending too much time in proximity to someone so far above his station that even breathing the same air felt presumptuous. The xenobiology research was going well. The Caliph ecosystem was fascinating. Bioluminescent flora that responded to emotional states, symbiotic relationships between species that defied Earth-based biological models, and evolutionary adaptations that suggested intelligence had developed in ways completely unlike human cognition. James could spend years studying this world and barely scratch the surface of its complexity. He'd published 2 papers already, collaborated with Caliph scientists who were brilliant and generous with their knowledge, and established himself as a valuable member of the human diplomatic delegation. His presence here was justified professionally, which was important to him. He never wanted anyone to think he'd come here for any reason other than legitimate scientific interest, especially not her. Queen Seris Valmurin was. James carefully redirected his thoughts before they could form into anything too detailed. She was the supreme ruler of the Caliph Empire, a political leader of extraordinary intelligence and strategic capability, and someone he had absolutely no business thinking about beyond professional respect and appropriate diplomatic courtesy. The Caliph were a beautiful species by any aesthetic standard. Long, elegant ears that expressed emotion through position and movement, graceful builds, eyes that held depths of awareness that suggested their telepathic abilities. But Seris was particularly striking. Silver threading in her dark hair that marked her royal lineage, ears that bore intricate jewelry denoting her status and achievements, and a presence that commanded attention without demanding it. James had noticed. Of course he'd noticed. He'd have to be dead not to notice. But noticing and acting on that notice were entirely different things, and he'd spent 3 months making sure his noticing stayed firmly in the professional observation category rather than anything more personal. He attended mandatory diplomatic functions where her presence was required. He spoke when spoken to, answered questions about his research with appropriate detail, and never lingered in her presence longer than protocol demanded. When assigned seating put him at her table, he engaged in polite conversation and then gracefully extracted himself as soon as possible. When her court sessions were open to the diplomatic delegation, he attended but sat in the back, taking notes on Caliph political processes without drawing attention to himself. His colleagues had noticed his restraint. Dr. Yuki Chen, the head of the human delegation's scientific contingent, had commented on it during their last team meeting. "You're very good at being professionally invisible," she'd observed. "Most of the other delegates are constantly positioning themselves to interact with Queen Seris or her inner council. You seem to actively avoid it." "I'm here to study Caliph biology, not to play politics," James had replied. "The less time I spend in formal diplomatic contexts, the more time I can spend on actual research." It was a true statement. It just wasn't the complete truth. The complete truth was that James knew exactly where he stood in the hierarchy of people who had any business being in regular proximity to the Caliph Queen. Somewhere far below, relevant. He was a scientist from a modest background, the son of agricultural engineers who'd worked Earth's vertical farms. He'd earned his doctorate through scholarships and stubbornness, built his career through competent research and avoiding politics. He had no connections, no family status, no political value that would justify regular interaction with alien royalty. More importantly, he'd noticed how other people behaved around Queen Seris. The barely concealed desire, the political calculation, the way conversations became performances designed to catch her attention or favor. The Caliph were more open about attraction than humans. Their telepathic abilities made hiding desire pointless, so they developed a culture where expressing interest was expected and accepted. But James had also noticed the weariness in Queen Seris's expressions when people approached her with that calculating interest. The way her ears would tilt back, something his cultural training had taught him, indicated resignation or disappointment. The careful distance she maintained even while being superficially warm and politically astute. She was surrounded by people who wanted something from her. James refused to be another one. So he maintained his distance, did his work, and carefully kept his thoughts disciplined whenever he was in her presence. The Caliph couldn't read minds completely. Their telepathy was more about sensing emotions and surface thoughts than deep mental invasion. But James had trained in meditation specifically to work around telepaths, learning to control his mental state and keep his thoughts focused and disciplined. It was exhausting, but it was necessary. At least he thought it was necessary until he received the summons. It came through Caliph official channels, but it wasn't from the diplomatic liaison office or the research coordinator. It came directly from the Queen's personal attendant, a Caliph woman named Thessa, whose ears bore enough status markers to suggest she was very high in the court hierarchy. "Dr. Rivera," Thessa said when she appeared at his research facility. "Her Majesty Queen Seris Valmurin requests your presence for a private audience, immediately." James felt his carefully maintained calm crack slightly. "I'm sorry, did you say private audience? Is this about my research permits? Has there been a problem with—" "No problem with your research," Thessa interrupted smoothly. "Her Majesty simply wishes to speak with you, alone. This is not a request you can decline." James's mind raced through possibilities. Had he violated some protocol he wasn't aware of? Had his careful distance somehow offended rather than shown respect? Had someone reported that he'd been too focused on the Queen during formal functions and misinterpreted his attention as inappropriate interest? "Of course," he said, already organizing his workspace for departure. "I can come now. Should I prepare any documentation about my research or—" "Just yourself, Dr. Rivera. Follow me." The walk through the palace was familiar and terrifying. James had been in these corridors dozens of times for formal events, but always as part of a group, always with the buffer of other people around him. Now it was just him and Thessa, walking through increasingly private sections of the palace that he'd never accessed before. They passed the formal throne room, bypassed the diplomatic receiving chambers, moved through corridors that became progressively less grand and more personal. Finally, Thessa stopped before a door that bore the Queen's personal seal. "Her Majesty is waiting inside," Thessa said. "You may enter." Is there specific protocol for private audiences?" "I don't want to. She'll tell you what she needs from you," Thessa said, which was not remotely reassuring. "Go." James entered the room and Thessa closed the door behind him, leaving him alone with the Queen. The space was smaller than he expected, clearly a private study rather than a formal receiving room. Books and data tablets lined shelves. Personal items suggested this was where Seris actually worked when not performing her public role, and the whole atmosphere was less intimidating than any place he'd seen her before. Seris herself sat in a chair near a window, dressed less formally than he'd ever seen her. Still regal, still marked by status in subtle ways, but more personal, like he was seeing her in a context that wasn't about her position. "Dr. Rivera," she said, and her voice was different too, less formal, more direct. "Please sit." James sat in the chair she indicated, across from her, and tried very hard to keep his thoughts disciplined and professional despite his racing heart. "Your Majesty, I'm honored by this audience. If there's anything about my research that—" "This isn't about your research," Seris interrupted gently. "Though I've read your papers, they're excellent. Thank you, Your Majesty. Your research is not why I asked you here." Seris's ears tilted forward, focused attention, evaluation. "I asked you here because I have a question that's been bothering me for 3 months, and I want an honest answer." "Of course, Your Majesty. I'll answer anything I can." "Why do you avoid me, Dr. Rivera?" The question hit James like a physical blow. His carefully controlled thoughts scattered completely, leaving only honest confusion and horror. Your Majesty, I don't." "You do," Seris said calmly. "You attend mandatory functions but never additional events. You speak when spoken to but never initiate conversation. When seating arrangements place you near me, you engage in polite dialogue and then extract yourself as quickly as protocol allows. You never seek my presence, never request private meetings, never position yourself for additional interaction." Her eyes, dark and impossibly aware, focused on him with intensity that made him feel exposed. "You avoid me, deliberately, consistently, and I want to know why." James felt his professional facade crumbling. The truth was too close to the surface, his discipline too strained after months of careful distance. "Your Majesty, I'm not avoiding you specifically. I'm being appropriately cautious about proximity to someone of your position and status." "Explain what you mean by appropriately cautious." "I mean," James struggled to articulate without revealing too much, "I'm a scientist, a commoner from a modest background. I have no political value, no social standing that would justify regular interaction with you. I maintain distance because it seems respectful and appropriate, not because I dislike your company or find you." He stopped himself before he could say something truly revealing. "Find me what?" Seris asked, and there was something in her tone that James couldn't quite identify. "Find you anything other than impressive," James finished carefully. "Your intelligence is obvious, your leadership remarkable. But that's exactly why I keep my distance. I have no right to impose my presence on someone so far above my station. Every moment I'm near you is a moment you could be spending with people who actually matter, who can provide value or insight or assistance that's meaningful to your position and responsibilities." Seris's ears rotated through several positions, surprise, something that might have been amusement, something else James couldn't identify. "So you avoid me out of respect?" "Yes, Your Majesty. And if you didn't maintain this distance, what do you think would happen?" James floundered. "I'd be wasting your time, being presumptuous, possibly making you uncomfortable with unwanted attention from someone with no business giving you attention at all." "I see." Sarah stood, moving to pour 2 glasses of something from a crystal decanter. She handed one to James, who accepted it with shaking hands. "Your answer is both exactly what I expected and not what I expected at all. I don't understand, Your Majesty." "I know you don't. That's part of what makes this so interesting." Sarah settled back into her chair, studying him over her glass. "Let me explain what you don't understand about your situation, Dr. Rivera. And then perhaps you'll understand why I've been watching you for 3 months with increasing fascination." James took a sip of his drink to cover his shock at the word fascination, and tried very hard not to let his thoughts spiral into dangerous territory. This conversation was not going where he'd expected at all. "In Caliph culture," Seris began, "we're very open about desire and attraction. Our telepathic abilities make hiding emotional states difficult, so we developed social norms that acknowledge and accept direct expression of interest. If someone finds another person attractive, politically, personally, sexually, they generally express that interest openly." James nodded carefully, his cultural training having covered this. "I'm aware of that cultural difference, Your Majesty. Are you also aware that as queen, I'm considered the most desirable woman in the empire? That my position, power, and personal attributes make me the focus of constant attention and pursuit?" "I had observed that, yes, Your Majesty." "Then you can imagine what my daily life is like," Seris said, her tone turning dry. "I am surrounded constantly by people who want something from me: political favor, access to power, personal advancement, trade agreements, military alliances, and beneath all of that political calculation, a significant number of them also want me physically." James kept his expression carefully neutral, though his mind was racing with implications he didn't want to examine too closely. "The Caliph approach to attraction is healthy in many ways," Seris continued. But it becomes exhausting when you're the object of constant pursuit and can never tell if someone values you as a person or just sees you as a conquest or a means to power. My telepathic awareness means I can sense their desire, their ambition, their calculating interest in what I can provide them. Her ears tilted back, the expression James had seen before, now clearly identified as weariness. It's degrading, isolating. I can never tell if someone genuinely wants to know me or just wants access to what I represent. That sounds incredibly difficult, Your Majesty, James said quietly. It is. And it's been my reality since I took the throne 15 years ago. Seris took a sip of her drink. Then the human delegation arrived and you came with it. At first, I barely noticed you, just another scientist doing his work, focused on research, polite informal contexts. But then I realized something unusual. Your Majesty, you were the only person in my court who didn't want anything from me. James blinked. I'm sure many people don't. No, Seris interrupted firmly. Everyone wants something. The nobles want political favor. The ambassadors want trade advantages. The military commanders want resources and authority. Even the servants want my approval and the security that comes with royal favor. Everyone wants something. She leaned forward. Except you. I want to do my research successfully without causing diplomatic incidents. James offered weakly. You want to do your job well and be left alone, Seris corrected. Which is fundamentally different from wanting something from me specifically. When I brush against your mind telepathically, which I do, to everyone in my presence, it's automatic. I sense discipline, focus on your work, careful respect for protocols, and genuine fascination with Caliph biology and culture. But I sense no grasping ambition, no desire to advance yourself through proximity to me, no calculation of how to turn our interactions into personal advantage. That's just professional behavior, Your Majesty. No, it's not. Professional behavior is polite and appropriate while still positioning yourself for advancement opportunities. What you do is actively avoid advancement opportunities because you've decided I'm above your station, and therefore someone to admire from distance rather than approach. James felt heat creeping up his neck. You can sense that. I can sense the surface thoughts and emotions, yes. You're quite disciplined, better than most at controlling your mental state around telepaths. But I've been watching you for 3 months, Dr. Rivera. I've picked up patterns. Seris's expression was complicated, something between amusement and something James absolutely could not let himself interpret as interest. You maintain careful boundaries. You speak to me only when protocol demands it. You never linger in my presence, never seek additional interaction, never position yourself to catch my attention. And your mind, when I sense it, is always controlled, respectful, genuinely focused on understanding rather than grasping. I apologize if my distance has somehow offended. It didn't offend me, Seris said. It intrigued me. James's carefully maintained calm cracked further. I don't understand, Your Majesty. I know. That's part of what makes you so interesting. Seris set down her glass and stood, moving to the window where light caught the silver in her hair. For 3 months, I've watched you maintain your boundaries. I kept waiting for you to break, for the restraint to slip, for you to start positioning yourself like everyone else does, seeking advantage or access or attention. But you never did. Even now, alone with me in my private study, your mind is carefully controlled, focused on understanding why I'm questioning you rather than seeing this as an opportunity to advance your interests. Because this isn't an opportunity, James said, confusion making him more honest than he intended. This is a private audience with the Queen where I'm terrified of saying something inappropriate or making you uncomfortable with my presence. And that terror, that careful respect, that refusal to see me as accessible despite being alone with me. Seris turned to face him, and her expression was more open than he'd ever seen it. That's what I've been unable to stop thinking about. James felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. Your Majesty, I'm not sure I understand what you're saying. I'm saying that in 15 years of being queen, surrounded by people who want something from me, power, status, my body, my favor, you're the first person who's wanted nothing, who's looked at me and consciously chosen distance out of respect rather than closeness out of ambition. Seris moved closer, and James forced himself to remain still despite his instinct to retreat. In Caliph culture, pursuit is common and expected, but restraint is rare. Self-control in the face of desire is considered one of the highest virtues, a sign of deep character and honor. I'm just being professional, James protested weakly. You're demonstrating restraint, Seris corrected, treating me like someone whose autonomy and position you respect too much to casually approach. And I find that more attractive than any amount of overt pursuit could ever be. The words attractive and pursuit were doing things to James's carefully maintained mental discipline that he absolutely could not afford. Your Majesty, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Has there? Let me be completely clear then. Seris was close enough now that James could see the intricate patterns in her ear jewelry, the way her eyes held depths of awareness and intelligence that were simultaneously intimidating and captivating. I've been watching you for 3 months, Dr. Rivera, watching you maintain your boundaries, wondering if you'd ever break, wondering what it would take to make you see me as someone you could approach rather than someone you must avoid. Not because I wanted to prove your weakness, but because I wanted to know what you'd be like if you allowed yourself to actually see me. See you. James's voice was rough. As a person you're interested in rather than a position you're appropriately cautious around. Seris's ears tilted forward, focused, evaluating. So I'm asking you directly, Dr. Rivera, is your distance pure professionalism? Is it solely about our different stations and appropriate boundaries, or is there something else beneath it? James's mental discipline shattered completely. Your Majesty, I don't think I should answer that question. Why not? Because the answer would be inappropriate. Try me. James stood, needing distance to think clearly, but Seris moved with him, maintaining their proximity. Your Majesty, you're the Queen. I'm a scientist from a modest background with no political value or social standing. Even having this conversation is. Answer the question, Seris said, and there was command in her voice now, the weight of 15 years of ruling. If I were not a queen, if we had met as equals in different circumstances, would you still keep your distance? The honest answer forced itself out before James could stop it. No, why not? Because you're brilliant, James said, the words tumbling out now that his restraint had broken. Because watching you navigate political complexity with such grace is mesmerizing. Because your intelligence is obvious in every decision you make. Because the way you listen during council sessions, actually listen, considering perspectives before deciding, suggests a depth of character and wisdom that's rare in any leader of any species. Because he stopped himself, breathing hard, realizing he just admitted far more than was safe or appropriate. Seris's ears were tilted fully forward now, her expression holding something James absolutely could not let himself interpret without explicit confirmation. Continue. Your Majesty, I've already said too much. You've barely started. She moved closer, and James forced himself to hold his ground. You were saying I'm brilliant, that you find my leadership captivating, that you listen to my political decisions with genuine interest. What else? What else? James laughed, the sound slightly unhinged. What else is there to say? That I've spent 3 months deliberately not looking at you too long because I was afraid my admiration would show. That I leave formal dinners early because staying near you for too long makes it hard to maintain professional distance. That I've avoided private interactions because I was terrified you'd sense my interest and be uncomfortable with attention from someone so far beneath your station. And are you interested? Seris asked quietly, personally interested beyond professional admiration. James looked at her, really looked, letting himself see her without the careful filters he'd maintained for 3 months. saw the intelligence in her eyes, the strength in how she held herself, the vulnerability she was showing by asking these questions so directly, saw the person beneath the position, the woman beneath the crown. "Yes," he admitted, "I'm interested. I have been since approximately week 2 when you presided over that dispute between the agricultural guilds and demonstrated that you'd actually read all the technical documentation rather than just relying on advisors' summaries. I've been interested and carefully hiding it ever since, because being interested in you was completely inappropriate given our positions and the power imbalance, and the fact that you're constantly surrounded by people whose interest is selfish or calculating, and I refuse to be another person making you uncomfortable with unwanted attention." Seris's ears tilted in what James now recognized with his shattered discipline as satisfaction. "And if I told you that your attention is not unwanted?" James's mind went completely blank. "I'm sorry, what?" "You heard me." Seris was close enough now that he could feel her warmth, could see the slight smile on her face. "What if I told you that your restraint, your respect, your refusal to treat me as accessible despite your attraction, that was exactly what I needed to see? That everyone else's desire is selfish and grasping, treating me as object or prize, but your desire was contained by respect for my autonomy, which makes it fundamentally different. I would say that you're the queen and can have your choice of anyone in the empire, so choosing someone like me makes no strategic sense, and I'm confused about what you're actually asking," James said honestly. "I'm asking if you would be willing to let go of some of that distance you've been maintaining," Seris said. "Not because of our positions, not because I'm ordering you, but because I'm choosing you and hoping you'll choose me back." James stood very still, trying to process what was happening while his mind was spinning in approximately 17 different directions. "Your Majesty, I need to be very clear about something before this conversation continues." "Go ahead." "I'm a xenobiologist from Earth. My father grows vertical farm crops. My mother manages irrigation systems. I got my doctorate on scholarship by being stubborn and reasonably intelligent. I have no family connections, no political value, no status that would make me a strategically appropriate choice for someone in your position." James took a breath. "If you're looking for someone to build an alliance with or advance some political agenda, I'm the wrong choice. If you're looking for someone who understands court politics and can navigate your social structures smoothly, I'm the wrong choice. If you're looking for someone whose background makes them suitable for proximity to royalty, I'm looking for someone who sees me as a person first," Seris interrupted. "Someone whose interest in me isn't about what I can provide them politically or socially. Someone who demonstrates restraint and respect rather than grasping ambition. Someone who, for 3 months, has maintained boundaries out of genuine consideration for my autonomy rather than calculated strategy to seem different from other suitors." She moved even closer, and James's heart rate spiked. "Are you that person, Dr. Rivera?" "I'm not trying to seem different from other suitors," James protested. "I'm not a suitor at all. I'm just trying to do my job without being inappropriate or making you uncomfortable. And that intention, that genuine respect for boundaries, that careful consideration of my comfort, that's what makes you different." Seris's expression was more open than he'd ever seen it. "Everyone else approaches me with intention to pursue. You approach me with intention to respect. Do you understand why that matters to someone in my position?" I'm beginning to," James admitted. "I'm surrounded by people who want access to my power, my body, my favor. They calculate how to approach me, what to say, how to position themselves for advantage. Their desire is selfish, focused on what they can gain rather than who I am as a person." Seris's ears tilted in what he now recognized as vulnerability. "But you've spent 3 months maintaining distance specifically because you were attracted to me and thought your attraction would be unwelcome. That kind of restraint, that consideration for my autonomy even at the cost of your own desires, That's what I've been searching for and couldn't find until you accidentally demonstrated it by trying to be professionally appropriate. James processed this carefully. So you're saying that my attempts to be respectful and maintain boundaries have somehow attracted your interest? More than attracted. They've convinced me that you might be the only person in my court who actually sees me as a person whose autonomy and comfort matter more than their own advancement. Seris touched his arm, a light contact that sent electricity through his nervous system. But I need to know if I'm reading this correctly. If I'm wrong about your interest, if your distance is purely professional with no personal element, tell me now. I don't want to make you uncomfortable by pursuing something you don't want. The role reversal was dizzying, the queen asking if she'd be unwelcome in pursuing him. James laughed slightly, the sound escaping before he could control it. Your Majesty, I've spent 3 months using meditation techniques to keep my thoughts disciplined around you, because I was terrified your telepathic awareness would pick up how attractive I find you and make you uncomfortable. I've left rooms when you entered because staying near you made it hard to focus on anything else. I've avoided looking at you directly during formal functions because I was afraid prolonged eye contact would reveal exactly how much I'd like to have conversations with you that aren't bounded by protocol and formal courtesy. He met her eyes directly for the first time without careful filtering. My distance is absolutely not because I don't want your attention. It's because I wanted it too much and thought it was completely inappropriate to want. Seris's smile transformed her face from regal to radiant. Then we've been dancing around the same attraction for 3 months, each of us thinking we were being appropriately respectful by maintaining distance. Apparently, yes. James felt slightly dizzy. Though I should point out that I was being appropriately respectful. You're the queen. I'm a commoner scientist. The power imbalance and status difference make my attraction something I should absolutely keep to myself. Except I'm telling you explicitly that I want you to stop keeping it to yourself, Seris said. That I'm choosing you, consciously and deliberately, not because of your status or political value, but because of who you are as a person. Because you've demonstrated the kind of character and restraint I've been desperately hoping to find in someone. She moved closer, and James's breath caught. The question is whether you're willing to choose me back. Not as the queen, but as Seris, the person who's tired of being pursued for her power and wants to be known for herself. James's mind was still trying to catch up with the reality that